Welcome to Mid-Maryland Votes, a non-biased, non-political party affiliated informational podcast dedicated to the politics and policies that affect the voters of the Mid-Maryland area. Tonight's guest is Darrell Evans, Board of Education member for Washington County. And here are the boys. Welcome to Mid-Maryland Votes. I'm your host, Mark Flynn. With me is my co-host,
Ethan Lowen.
And we are blessed tonight to have our first guest, Mr. Darrell. Can you just introduce yourself and let us know what position you have in the county?
Yeah. So I am Darrell Evans. I am a Washington County Board of Ed member by night, and by day I am a financial advisor. And a lot of people ask me why I am on the Board of Ed when I don't have any kids in the school system, and all I do is teach people how to count their money for a living. But what a lot of people forget about me is that I was a teacher for 10 years, and I taught out in Anne Arundel County before my career pulled me out this way. And when I left teaching, I always wanted to be that guy that could go and make the teacher's job what they actually signed up for. And I felt as though the people in my current position were making that not possible. So I ran for the Board of Ed about 4 years ago, and lost miserably in a write-in campaign. But there was another Board of Ed member at the time who was asked to resign, and the county commissioners filled that seat with me. And then 2 years later, when that seat came up for election, I got elected, and here we are 2 years after that. So, but we've had quite a big change here recently. This is the first time since I've been on the board that we have had any change in the board. So 4 years later, we have three brand new board members, and it's a pretty big change. All three board members had I think it's safe to say that they had a very different philosophy or mindset than the other three that were not reelected. And so we've had quite a few changes, and for better or for worse. I guess we'll see how that looks out in the next 2 years, but that's where we are today.
And then since that election, there's been a lot of changes, you said. So can you kind of encapsulate for us what are some of those changes that you've seen since the elections just a few months ago, right?
November? Yeah, exactly. You could go and kind of read and watch the news and see all the rhetoric out there, but my personal humble observation is for the most part, the former majority, they kind of wanted to, they agreed with what administration wanted to do, and for the most part, what they wanted they got, for better for worse. Again, for the most part, my 4 years here, it took the fourth year for people to go and make the change. So maybe it is what the people wanted, maybe it isn't. But now I will say that this budget season, the fourth budget season, I guess now this is the fifth budget season, maybe, since I'm going on year 5, that now this one seems to be a little different. There's a lot more questions being asked, and there's more board members trying to put in specific things or even take out specific things. So that's kind of why I say that I think it's safe to say that the previous board agreed mostly with what administration wanted to do, and here we are, and the new majority is trying to ask for for what I would consider some pretty big differences. So,
and because most people don't understand how the hierarchy of public education works. They know the teachers, they know the principals. With you referencing that, there are board members that agree with administration, there are board members who don't agree with administration. Can you kind of give just a little bit more information on what that dynamic is, and what does that mean, the difference between the board and the administration?
And I think I should probably take a step back too. That's a good question, because while I'm sitting here saying that, half the board agrees or half doesn't, whatever, that's a really big generalization. It's probably not fair to say it that way because, I mean, me, myself, there are some really big differences that I do have, philosophically with many of the people in the administration. But at the end of the day, I'm still voting yes on what they're proposing, probably a good 90% of the time. But with that being said, I think that some of the biggest things is um, more the spending. I think most of the previous board was under the mindset that there just was never enough. Education is an investment, and if staff says they need it, they need it. And again, that's a big generalization, and I'm not trying to make it sound like people are just spending money willy nilly. But I'm of the mindset that yeah, education is an investment, but as a financial advisor, I don't think it's smart to just go and throw money at something without doing your research first. And I've been asking for what goals have been achieved by certain spending, whether it's old spending or new spending or what. I've been asking for goals, and when I don't get the answer for that, then I go and ask them to cut that from the budget. And if the majority of the board agrees, then it happens. If it doesn't, then it doesn't. That's
And
kind
that's
of
a
where
really
my comes in.
Absolutely. And it's a really good point that you bring up, with the difference in investment, just the difference in mindset. I remember I had the opportunity to talk to the Washington County Chamber of Commerce a few years ago. And one of the things that was being discussed was that just the difference in spending between the various states in the country, the spending per student, and how big the difference is in academic performance. And that actually, you look at the states that spend in the bottom 50%, and that's where you find most of the top 50% academic performers, which runs counterintuitive, but based on what you're saying, certainly makes sense. Um, I guess the question that I would have is that with the spending that is being proposed, with people have heard of the blueprint for Maryland's future. What is it in there that you would, just in general terms, agree or disagree with?
Well, I'm going to quick step back. I always say to your comment where, you look at the states with the most spending and their performance seems to be less. Quite frankly, first, I will say that I don't really go and look at what other states are doing as far as the spending goes. I'm more interested in what I can affect change in here in my local community. But not to say that looking at what other states are doing is invalid. I think there is some validity to that. But when you go in and kind of generalize everything into spending per pupil, there's different ways that states run their education. And I'm not saying that any one way is better or worse. Where I grew up in Pennsylvania, as a generalization, it's not exactly this way, but the local municipality runs each school district, right? Where here you have your county running it, and I would go and say that instead of I would go and say that be careful when you go and generalize the spending because there are different ways to do it, and maybe the way one state is set up just isn't possible for another state to set it up the same way. But to get to your question, the the blueprint. Honestly, I'm going to go and just throw it right out there. Um, no matter what, there's good things that happen when there are good things in a bill that is bigger than the Bible itself, right? Um, there's going to be good things in there. The fact of the matter is, every single time I remember when they were sitting there trying to pass that bill, the state would send representatives out to different community meetings trying to go and advertise it. And, they would be selective on which questions got answered. And you had to go and submit your questions ahead of time. I remember, and I even went to one of these meetings as well at the Washington County Library. And, they were very selective on the questions they asked, and you had to submit it before time. And at the end of the day, when you went and looked at what they were touting as the good things on it, it was just one page front and back. But the bill itself was, I don't even know how many pages it was, but certainly a heck of a lot more than one page. And
there's a couple hundred pages and $3 billion worth of spending.
Yeah. And so, so when you go and look at it, I would argue that whatever is good in it is irrelevant to try to nitpick every single part out of it. I think it should be scrapped and start over. Obviously, that wouldn't happen. The state legislature went and overrode Governor Hogan's veto on it, so it's not going to happen that way. So we have what we have, and the best we could do is implement it, according to law, and do our best to work with the law to still provide an education that aligns with our community's values.
So what in the blueprint you think does not equal the community values? Or what have you seen in the blueprint that will be hard to justify with community values?
This kind of goes into what's been happening over the past month. One of the things that I've asked to remove from our budget, and I've been asking to do this now for however long it's been in the budget. I think it's 3 years now. This is the fourth year. I think it would have been in the budget. Is I asked to remove the position entitled Supervisor of Equity and Excellence. And not that I think it's a bad thing. Obviously, you want to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion. The problem is what we're told it is doesn't seem to be the way it is. And, I think that to go and really help our students be included and be given the same opportunities to succeed, I don't think we need any more paper pushers at the home office. And so there are requirements to go in and implement a lot of these ideals that don't quite get to what I think our community would agree with. I think there's a lot of the transgender stuff. I think there's going to be a big battle here, even though the president signed the executive order with men and women's sports. I think there's going to be a big battle with that, and I don't know exactly how Blueprint reads on that, but I'm sure there's going to be some verbiage in there that will be twisted to go and promote that. So that's one of the big things that I worry about. Like I said, without being an expert on the law itself, just knowing some of the basics, I worry about that the most. I think the other thing is the way the law is written. It was estimated by the author of the bill, essentially, that it would require 15,000 new teachers to be hired as a result of this. And the minimum starting wage, according to state law, is $60,000. Well, that right there alone is a $900 million investment. We almost added $1 billion there, but don't forget, that was, what was it, last year, the year before last year, we had to start doing that. Now we're under contract negotiations. Is the teachers union going to let us get away with going and saying, all right, here's a 3% increase for everyone but that first year teacher? Absolutely not. So that starting wage is going to continue to increase, on top of the fact that a fifth year teacher is not going to want to get paid the same as a first year teacher. So now everyone got paid more, and that goes into a very big reason for what we see is causing a lot of our fiscal problems here in the state.
Yeah. And with, I guess, the blueprint, if I understand correctly, has a automatic baseline increase in spending of $3.8 billion statewide. And that is actually more than a 10% increase to all of the taxes and fees that the state collects. And it's now gotten to the point where there's an increase in unfunded mandates. Those things that the state says that you, the County Board of Education, has to pay for, but we're not going to give you the money to pay for it. We're just telling you that you have to pay for it. How is that affecting the budget at this point in time, or even the ability to be able to function in certain ways?
Well, I will say that this is probably the most important part of the bill is the funding of it, and the formulas, the equations that I guess you're citing there. I am unaware. I mean, I know they're there. I just don't know exactly what the formulas are. So to go and say what the increases are, I'll take your word for it. But I think that's kind of where my concern is. Where I grew up in Pennsylvania, the local board members, school board members, had taxing authority, and when the state goes and has required increases on top of the fact that they also add in required increases to the county commissioners, who have little say, if any say, into what happens with the state. It's essentially becomes an unfunded mandate. And I think that's where the biggest problem is. This bill, and there are many bills coming up that probably will be passed in the near future, if not this year. I would imagine they will be passed sometime in the near future, that take even more of the local control away from local school boards and county commissioners.
If you liked the podcast, go ahead and like us and follow us on Facebook at Mid-Maryland Votes, and also on our YouTube channel at Mid-Maryland Votes. Thank you for joining us.